Hi friends, and welcome to my weekly live stream about the Uno platform. My name is Jérôme Laban. I'm the CTO of the open source project Uno platform, and I'm spending about an hour every week taking a look at the Uno platform, what's been happening for the past week, and live coding a set of features to see how it's done and how you can contribute if you want to, or if you just want to know how we're developing the Uno platform for you. And this week you're going to be taking a look at two features. The first one is X-bind casting, which is something that has not been implemented yet, and not completely. And the other one is metadata creation, which is a smaller feature that was requested by a developer on the Uno platform, GitHub. So let's take a look at. But let's take a look actually at a features that we wanted to implement last week, and I had a PR for this previously. This is, so let's take a look at my PRs. Not that one. And we had this. So if I take a look at the closed PRs, there was one specifically, and it was a feature that was implemented last week. So it was all about getting Xbind to use a very specific feature that's called pathless casting. And pathless casting is actually quite interesting. And if we take a look at the documentation for this, so Xbind, as you may know, is always about binding two features. The binding two contexts. So the first one is if you're inside the main application, the main page or a page, then if you want to access self, which is the data context for the page itself, it can be a bit difficult. So the syntax for doing this is by using the type of the context. So this is a bit different. This one is for when you're inside of a data template. So let's say you're in an item template and you want to access the data context that was passed to the data template, and that can be done using that syntax. So you're basically using the type of the data context, and it will do pretty much what you could do if you're using a standard binding, which is using a dot. So if you are doing binding dot, then you will be able to data bind to the data context itself. But in the context of calling a method, it doesn't work. So you cannot use dot. And this is done using that syntax, so the local song. So this was implemented as part of Uno. So it's something that actually have a UI test for. So I actually took the same sample that we were using last week. And it's about using that that specific syntax here. And the other one, I think it was there, it was all about using control itself. So I'm putting, if I have a user control and I'm X-binding itself to the tag of the text block property. So it's not particularly useful in that context, but the point is that you can invoke a method, could be, let's say, a helper method that's in another class, and then you can reuse the instance of the control itself for your own purposes. So that's pretty nice. So there you go. There also was another feature that we worked on last week, which is the support for dependency property localization. And it's actually something that a customer of Uno asked for, and we bumped the priority up so that we could provide support for it. And that feature is support for attached property localization here. And to enable this, most of it was done with some changes, but where we left last week was about the fact that the names of the resources that we were reading internally were not in the right format. So it was breaking the fact that the path that's written in an example. So this is something that you can find in a ResW file, and this is the X name. This is the namespace to go to the tooltip service, and then there were internal changes that were not the right ones. So now it's done properly, and you can data bind this. So what that means is that inside of a piece of XAML, so let's take a look at a piece of XAML that we wrote, you can do something like this. So you can have a button which has an XUID, and inside of a resw file, if you add a resw for which the path matches the XUID plus the attached property name, then you can data bind that value without having to specify explicitly the attached property in the XAML. So that's one of the things that we implemented, that they implemented last week, and it's actually done already. So if you want to take a look at that PR, this is the number 10,004. And yes, we've crossed the 10,000 PRs on the main repo. So that's pretty nice. So there you go. So that's for the features that were implemented last week. So now we're going to take a look at the Xbind casting feature. Same thing was requested by the team from the community toolkit, and they're using those features, quite a few. But actually, no, let's take a look at the other one, because it's an easy one, and we're gonna come back to this one. So I want to take a look at that other feature. Let me find the link for this. And it's the property metadata.create. That is there. Okay, so what is reported is that property metadata.create is not implemented. So if we take a look at the feature, it's pretty much a set of 4 methods which do object create. So you can create metadata, so the property metadata class, and you're going to get all those 4s. And that's interesting because that's an artifact of the fact that some of the APIs that are projected by WinRT are not able to use the default constructors in some cases. So in general, you wouldn't write this. You would write, and we're not seeing it here, but you would write property metadata, a new property metadata, and then write it that way. The only thing where it makes sense is that there's a property metadata.create where you can specify the create default value callback. And that one is actually quite interesting. And there are some cases where it may not make sense, and we're going to have to figure out what this one does. And it may be that we're going to create some of those, but not all of them. But let's go take a look. We're going to create those 2 first, and then those 2 afterwards. So the one with the create default callback value. And I recall that we implemented part of it at some point in the past, but the way create default value callback was behaving was not exactly what we wanted. And I think there was a problem with the fact that the create default value callback was not called on every construction of a control. So let's go take a look. Let's create an application. Let's create a default application using Uno, and let's go take a look at what that does. So let's make a metadata test 01. So we can use all of those. Let's remove the mobile ones, and let's keep just those 2. Okay. So let's try to figure out what that behavior is. And it may be different from another API. I don't recall which one that is, but we're just going to make sure that's what we want. Okay, so let's create a dependency object. So I'm going to call it my test object. And in that dependency object, I'm going to create a dependency property. So if you don't, I don't know if you've seen that one, but hey, I see there's an Onionware, one from Germany. Hi, welcome to the stream. Thanks for listening. And there's also KAA10, which is coughing. Hi. So there's the snippet with prop DP. So if you press tab on this one, it's Pedro. Hi, Pedro. So we're just gonna change this to be. Oh, actually, you're not gonna change it. Let's keep it as is. And instead of using the new property metadata here, we're just gonna take a look quickly at the overloads from this particular one. Not too sure if there's so we're on the WinUI one, so that's not the one we want. So let's go for Windows. So if I go here, which one can we see? Okay, so we can see that the two constructors that are available are default value and property change callback. But there's another one for create that uses default value callback and others. So let's go take a look at the behavior for those. And I'm not too sure if they're available completely at this point. So we're going to see what the behavior of that one is. Okay, so Pedro is saying, are those snippets public to get? Well, they're part of Visual Studio. There's actually, there's two that I know of, or there are actually much more, but there's two that are generally used. So there's prop DP, which create a dependency property. And there's also prop A, which create an attached property. That's the two that are useful for creating dependency objects. There's Onionware that says, and I'm considering porting my current main project, Onion Media, which is based on WinUI 3 to Uno platform. Does it have the same function as WinUI 3, or do you have to do without some things? It has to be fast to run as well, cross-platform. And it's saying Onion Media is an open source video downloader converter, and it needs a lot of performance to access FFmpeg's and YouTube download binaries. Okay, so the question is, does it have the same functions as WinUI? So that's what we intend to have. Now, the WinUI API is, WinUI and WinRT APIs are very, very large. So you may encounter features that we have not yet implemented. So that's why we want you to let us know using issues or discussions. The best way to do it is to try it out and see, what's gonna work or not. If it has to be fast, well, it depends on the platform. So it depends on what you're doing, depending on the platform support, depending on if you want to make it run on a low-end Android device, it may not work as well. Or if you want to run on WebAssembly, depending on platform support or the target features or the browser that you're running on, it may not be as fast. So try it out. It's pretty much the best way to do it. As for accessing FFmpeg, if you're on Windows, this is a standard. On Windows, actually on Windows you may not need it unless you want to go to Windows 7, in which case it may be useful. And FFmpeg is accessible as a library, so you can p-invoke to it in the same way you would with standard C#. Same way for YouTube download libraries. For WebAssembly, it's a little bit different. I know that there were ports of FFmpeg that were available as part, port of FFmpeg for WebAssembly, but I don't know how fast they are. I know that we're adding support for SIMD because the .NET team has been working on it. So SIMD and threading as part of .NET 7. So it may be of use for you because converting libraries, it's something that takes a bit of CPU and probably features from the CPU that that may be there. So stay tuned. Actually, you can probably already try this if you want to go for WebAssembly as well. So let us know by starting discussions and others. I see McNets is here. Thanks for joining as with every week. Okay, so let's go continue this. So what we want here is to try out new property metadata. So what I want to see is, come on. I'm going to use the property metadata.create that uses the create with a callback. So what I want to see here, and where it says, is it possible to run FFmpeg with WebAssembly on the client side? We need to access to the drive to a limited space with a conversion with the server on the other client. So FFmpeg, as I mentioned, maybe. Actually, can you go take a look? There's probably someone that did it. Oh, actually, it's already there. Oh, there you go. FFmpeg WASM. So it exists. That's a good thing. So it may still be something that you need to compile by yourself. It's probably not usable as is for .NET. So there's a few things to do to make it work properly, like compiling with the right version of Emscripten and things like that. That's not something that is just off the shelf at this point, but it's probably something that you can probably do. Or we may do at some point because it would make sense because of the fact that we're going to be starting to support SIMD, and conversion or compilation would be very interesting there. That's the first thing. And for YouTube download, I don't know. That's the other thing. And finally, it would need access to the drive to alternatively use the unlimited space. So it's something that you can do. And it's based on the use of the APIs that are provided by Chromium, which is access to the file system. So you can ask the user to give you a pointer to a file to save to. And you're going to be writing to the actual file system. So that's the good thing. So there may be a few caveats there, but try it out and let us know. It's there's documentation about this. If you take a look at the Uno platform documentation here, if you search for storage, there's storage pickers. And if you take a look at the folder picker for WebAssembly here, there's file system access to API picker. So it uses the file system API access to get access to the actual files on the file system. So take a look at that and let us know. Okay, so let's go back to our property. So what we want to know is, do we go into that specific, do we go into that specific handler multiple times or just once? And I recall in the previous discussion, I don't know if it was online or not, but the problem was that Lambda was only called once per thread, which was not super interesting. We wanted to have that executed for every instance of the dependency object. So let's figure this out. Make sure that we're having the right the right intuition here. Okay, so we're gonna do some right line here. No. Oh. Right line, and it will be grade default value. Okay, so and then we're going to be creating multiple versions of those objects. So let's say just going to create one and see if we're going into into that specific constructor. Okay, so it's deploying. So we're testing the actual Windows application. So we're not testing Uno at this point. We're just trying to guess the behavior of the Windows application. So what WinUI does really at this point. So okay, so deployment failed. Interesting. This is new. Okay. Maybe I do have an app that was deployed here for some reason. It's broken again. Okay, so Visual Studio didn't like it that much. Let's terminate it again. Wow. That was an intense crash. Okay. Okay, maybe it was because I opened Visual Studio. It's actually it was the instance that I opened last week, so it could be because of this. Okay, so let's try again. Okay. My Explorer was not too much happy about this. Just going to change the ID of the app so that we don't overwrite something that was already there. So in the package manifest, I'm going to be changing the ID of the app. So packaging, let's put a 0 at the beginning and call it grid start 2. 02, it's fine. Okay, let's try again. Okay, it deployed. Good. Okay, so let's see, do I hit my breakpoint? I hit my breakpoint, but I didn't hit the breakpoint for this particular part. So it says, oh, I not implemented it. Oh no, that's fine. Okay, so that's what we were trying to do. Okay, so we can see here that we didn't call that specific constructor because we probably didn't get the value for this one. So let's actually go and read the value. So calling it my property. P1. Let's start again. What do we get this time? Okay, so we're going into the creation of the property, which is fine. So we're getting it to once. And let's duplicate that block and see, do we go into it twice? And the assumption for the assumption is that we're going to go into it once, but that's not the case. So we're going into it twice, which is good because it's actually different from another implementation that we had, where the default value for the creation here was completely different. And I wonder. So there was another one. It's probably, maybe it's a different implementation for register that we had. Or maybe it's inside property metadata itself. There was a creation handler that was only for one single instance for the whole UI thread, but that's not the case here. So that's actually very good. And we're going to be able to surface something because we have that internally. You know, there's a way to provide. So internally, Uno provides a way to define a default value, but for some reason we didn't know about this one, or I don't know, maybe it was added somewhere else in the future when we started implementing Uno. So that could be. So we're going to be changing this now. Let's go try to figure out why we didn't see that one first. Maybe it's inside of property metadata itself. There you go. So there's create instance with default value. It's probably the one that we were looking at. Or maybe not. No, that one uses something else, so that's not what we're looking for. There's a create default value callback. Property metadata create. There's something curious here because it was supposed to behave differently, and I wonder if it's something that has changed between WinUI and UWP. So let's go and try with UWP as well. Let's add another project here, and we're gonna make it. Let's see, do I still have the UWP? Yes, I do have the UWP templates. So question is, isn't property default value immutable? Well, that's the thing, it is immutable, but if you want to make it, if you want to create a new value for whichever instance you want, and the most common use case for this is that if you have a list of something, in that case, you cannot have just one list. It's going to be one per instance of the instance of the dependency object. So that would mean that in here, instead of returning the list of object, it would return new list of object. And every time I'm accessing that property, then the instance of that list would be different. If it were the same, then it would be just wreaking havoc. So it would not work properly. So it looks like there's something that is different that we missed. I want to understand that. So let's see. So if I take the whole block here and put it in UWP, does it behave the same way? The assumption would be that it does behave the same way, but not too sure. So let's go and figure this one out. It's supposed to be a port, so it's supposed to be UWP behaves the same way. Maybe they changed that in some way when they moved from WinUI to the other one, but I don't know. Let's see if that's actually the case. Okay, so we have first execution, second execution. Okay, so that's not the API I'm looking at. So let's see if we have another one. Maybe it was from dependency property. There's register attached. There's get metadata. Maybe it was something else that we could provide in another location. So there's a create default value callback here. Let's see if there was a discussion on Uno, because I want to make sure that we're implementing the right property, because it may be different in that case. So if I search for create default value callback, there's this one. Actually, it was Roblu that was asking for this. And the question was, beware that based on the latest test and docs, instead of fixed constant default value, in that case, where default value's dependency might be thread bound. So the callback is invoked once per thread and not for each new instance of the owning control. Okay, so which one would that be? We're talking about create default value callback and property metadata. Create default value callback delegate. So it may be different because it may have changed. So the documentation says something and it actually behaves differently. So gets a reference to the callback. Okay, so let's take a look again at the text. It says instead of fixed constant, callback equal once per thread. Okay, there's something that doesn't fit there because it definitely is called differently. And becomes the factory for the default. So it says the create default value callback becomes a factory for the default values whenever there is a need to get the default values of the properties on threads other than the main thread. I'm not too sure what that means there, because if it's called from the UI thread, getting a default value would be weird. But okay. Metadata is submitted through register call. So it looks like it's doing the right thing. Okay, so there was an implementation somewhere in the past, and that implementation was done. Okay, saying that would you be able to provide help on how to do that? Can you validate the behavior? So I said a while back. And we have the get object for create value here. With a new button per each click. So it's very expected to execute every time. So that's good. So I validate the behavior using a blank app. It's actually broken. It reinvokes the code every time until you explicitly set the DP. Okay. Okay, so that's interesting. So it's not necessarily broken. It's the fact that the default value is material. It's not materializing the value. Okay, so let's take a look at that part. So we're saying that if we're getting the property twice, it's not going to store the value. It's going to execute the get value callback every time. That's an implementation detail that's pretty interesting. So do we get called twice? So that's the first time, second time. Okay, so that's very interesting because that means that the way that the dependency object works is that if the default value is not defined, every time you're trying to get the default value, it executes the callback. So it's not storing the default value, it's actually building it every time there's an invocation. So, well, that's pretty much interesting. So we're gonna have to dig into that one a bit more, because it seems interesting, and that also means that the this is a duplicate of the other discussion that we had here. So we may have to implement this properly. So we're going to be linking those two. Okay, so that's the first one, and we discovered something, or actually you rediscovered something, forgot about that discussion, and something that we're going to have to figure out differently. So next is taking a look at the support for xbind markup for casting. So this one is a bit different. Let's create another app. And if we take a look at the issue that was opened, I'm not too sure if this one's going to fit in the half hour that stays, that's left, but say we'll see what that means. Okay, so we're taking a look at this one. So we have a switch presenter which needs to data bind something with a cast that's using selected item. Selected item is probably an object, and it needs to be cast to an actual instance. So the dot name afterwards is working properly. So let's try to see what Uno does using the latest builds, because we made a few changes there to see if that works properly. So let's make an Uno app. We're saying it's xbind cast test, and at the right place. So no Android, just let's take just WinUI. That's going to be enough. Okay. So to write this, we're saying we need a class that's an object here. So we need something that's an object that we need to cast to something else that is of another type. So in that case, let's say that we're going to make a property here that's of type object. And we're going to set that property to another type. My data. Let's call it name. And what we're going to do is set the my property to my data. And let's make it public so it makes it easier. And we're going to set the name to hello Twitch. There you go. Okay, so we have this. Then we need to do an xbind to our property here. So it's going to be property, and in here the property that we have is an object. So if you want to set to, let's make our property an integer actually. So this one is in a margin, so let's put it in the font size instead. Let's put it on the font size, and we're going to call it font size instead. It's going to be easier that way. It's got size, and here we say size is 42. Okay, so that's good. So now we have my property that's an object. So what we want to do is cast the object that we get from my property here to my data to do a dot size afterwards. So to do this, we should be able to do local column my data, and then cast my property to do dot size. That looks good. Okay, so if we run that with Windows, let's actually put that as the path for the text as well, so we can see the same value. And if we run that, what happens? So it should be working, obviously. And it says 42 and it's pretty large, so that's good. It works properly. So now if we go to Uno, I think it will fail to build because we don't have the support for that completely, I would guess. Okay, so we say in identifier expected, so that doesn't work. So let's update to a later version of Uno, latest dev build, and see if we need to fix something here. Or maybe it would have, maybe it would have progressed in some way. Take all this, gonna update Uno to the latest. And okay, so let's rebuild again and see what we do get as a result. Okay, so we have this exact same issue, so that's interesting. If we double click on it, what does it show? No, it doesn't show anything. So it doesn't show anything because it's part of the analyzer's output. And in there, we don't see anything. So let's go and add the right property. Let's go pick that one up in Uno because I never remember that one. And the tooling doesn't give us the property because it's a hidden one. So inside of Uno, if it wants to come here, so I have I think I modified the Uno UI tests recently so that we add that. I think we worked on that one a bit before. So I think I changed that somewhere in there. Do I have the latest? I don't have the latest, that's why. Does my pull work? It does. And there we should be having an updated version of this that says that block is useful if you wanna debug. So I'm gonna put that block, except maybe the Uno source generator debugger break, because that's not yet something that we want to diagnose. Actually, let's keep it there. Just comment it out, and we're gonna come back to it afterwards as we need to debug the analyzers. Okay, so it says identify expected. So we should be able to go to that file that was generated. So if we show all files, we're going to get the ops folder, and then you have the generated folder here, and it shows us the example code generator and the main file. If we go to the line 81, we should be seeing the code that was generated for this, and it's probably incorrect. So let's figure this one out. Okay, so we have the set binding provider. We have a few things that are generated. The ternary, and then it does something that's completely wrong, which is this. Okay, so that's completely incorrect. So what it does is that it assumes that the property that was provided here, the property that was provided here is something that is not something that should be prefixed, and what we should be getting is something that looks like this instead. So if we were to generate the code there, that would work, because t context, which is the main page, we get the property, which is the object, and then cast it to metadata.size. So that should be working. But it's not, because the generator doesn't understand the fact that my property is something that should be prefixed. And we need to provide it a way to get to a point where it actually can detect that properly. So let's go figure this one out. So inside of Uno, you can probably remove all this, probably not that useful. don't know what I changed, but let's change all this. Okay. So if you've never done this, which is debug uno, we're going to create UI test, a unit test to change all this and to create a feature. So what you have here is a cross-targeting override props file, and then we're going to change that file to be copy that file to be a cross-targeting override props, and then we're going to change the file to have the Uno target framework override to be net461, which is the one that's used for Uno UI tests, and open with that solution filter here. So let's open that solution filter. So we're doing this because it takes a while to open, because there's a lot of there are lots of projects in that solution, and we're actually adding some more with the advent of .NET 7. And that's quite a few new projects that are going to be added to the solution. So I think we're going to reach the 200 somewhere during next year as we add new projects and new features. Okay, so there are tests already that do exist, and there are two kinds of tests. The first one is directly in the source generators, and we have an XBind parser here that exists. And it's probably not the one that we want here. I think it's the XPath rewriter. There you go. The XBind rewriter. Okay, so we do have some support for data context. I'm sorry. We do have support for casting. So if you specify a value and then you cast it once, it works. But it doesn't work if you're using it, let's say, inside of a method call, because that one is going to try to do something weird with the function here. It should be using context, but it doesn't work. So we should be doing this. So probably missing something as like the expected expressions, or what's supposed to be a known member that should be prefixed. And we're going to have to figure this one out. So let's see. So if we uncomment this one, let's see if it actually fails. That's actually close to what we're trying to debug here, because the debugging that we need is the fact that we're not getting to the my property here, and we're not getting to my property here, and we're not prefixing it with the right way. So we can see that the test failed, and it's not showing for some reason. So let's go pick it up from here. And it says expected context my function, context my properties should be that way, and it's only saying context my function, which is right because it's a function that's part of the current context, but it does not detect the fact that my property should be that it's a property that is coming from the current context. So we have to hint the rewriter that takes the original expression that comes from XBind to be something that needs to be prefixed. So let's try to get to the point where we actually can change that. So in here we say that we have an XBind expression. So that would be one of the tests that we have, and the other one would be the one that we had before. So something that looks like this. My property dot test. So property dot test, and here we should be having global int32. Well, that one is weird. It shouldn't be that way. So let's call it what do we have as an object that would make sense there? There isn't any, so let's invent one. It's going to be my class, my property dot test, my class of property dot test. So that should work, and it's likely that it's going to fail in a different way, which is going to be including the context in front, which is incorrect. So that's, let's go figure if it's actually not doing that. If that was the function one, so that's the other one. So it says my class context, that's the expected, and the new one is prefixing context with test in front, which is not good. Okay. So we're going to try to add the proper context at the right location. So Jose is asking which feature is not supporting binding that are supported in Xbind. Function binding, that's one that is supported in Xbind that is not in binding. That is actually the biggest one. So let's say if you have an expression that looks like this, this is a property that comes from your data context, or that comes from your current control, or it could be something that comes from completely somewhere else. It could be an X named element, so you can call it that way. But there's also the fact that you can call a method with multiple parameters. So for instance, this one, you can have you can call a method here and have two parameters. The first one being a constant string, and the other one being a parameter, or multiple parameters for that matter. So it's something that you can format the content directly inside of an Xbind expression. There are a few other things like binding to events, or well, we saw it at the beginning, which is the pathless casting. So having access to the cell, having access to the current binding context. Okay, so this is definitely incorrect. So one thing that we can do is take a look at how an expression like this is structured. So and to see how we can build this. And it's something that we've done in the past, and Kirill Osenkov has been developing a tool that's actually quite useful for this. And then there's a WebAssembly version of it. There it is. It's called Roslyn Quarter. There it is. And what that does is it takes the expression that you input here and turns it into the object model of Roslyn. Okay, so in there I have a lot of things, but it looks like it's completely broken, or making something that is, it doesn't know what to do. So we're going to make it because it doesn't know the context. So let's say if it's an expression, what does it say? Okay, expression is better. Okay, so it parses it as an expression. I don't know. Okay. So we have a member access expression with a parenthesized expression, which is a cast with two identifiers, my property and my class. And that one, so okay, so it's a cast to my class from my property, which is nice. And then it's a parenthesized expression, which is weird, but that's how it's parsed. And then it does simple member access expression from that parenthesized expression to the identifier name set test. So with this, we're able to get to the point where we should be able to know if we're having a parenthesized expression and it's a cast expression, and inside we have an identifier, and that identifier is known. We should be prefixing it properly and not trying to prefix the whole expression. So that's what we're doing at this point. That doesn't work. And that's a very nice tool from Kirill. It's so useful to get to when you're developing source generators, or manipulating Roslyn in any way. You can see the right syntax, and probably should be updating it to use Monaco instead of just plain text box, because having spell checking at that location is not particularly useful. Okay, so we have this. So if we go back to the code, if we go to the rewriter, we have a large piece of code here that does lots of things with parsing. But basically what we're doing is that we're generating an expression, and we're parsing that expression using a C# syntax rewriter. So we're taking all the elements of the expression and rewriting as we go. So the idea would be that we're passing the expression and we're going to member access, then the parenthesized expression, then the cast expression, then we're going to this part, which is my class here and my property. And what we should be doing is actually replacing the identifier name here by something that has the context instead. So we want the rewriter to add the context to that property. So what we want to be understanding is that if we're parsing an identifier name and we're inside a cast expression, inside a parenthesized expression, be something like that, then we should be using context in front of the identifier in there. So let's see if we can find that location. So we have a few things that we're doing here. So we're visiting invocation, we're visiting member access expressions, and we're also visiting identifier names. So the one that we want is this one. We're saying, we're already doing, if we're inside a cast, and we're already doing parsing based on this, saying that if we're inside a cast, what should we be doing? The thing is that we're not taking into account the fact that if we're inside a cast and we're inside a parenthesized expression, then the identifier should be rewritten differently, because we're already rewriting parts of that with this. So we're saying if it's a valid parent, it's not a static member, then we're adding the context in front. So the context builder here is actually writing the context that we have in front. It's basically adding the dot context that I just added here. So the dot context, that's right here. But we're not detecting condition of the fact that we're inside of an expression, inside of a parenthesized, cast expression, inside of a parenthesized expression. So we should be rewriting it differently. So let's add this. Let's add this differently. So we can know if we're inside a cast. We're already defining this. But what we don't know if we're also inside a parenthesized expression, but that's just above the cast. So we don't want to catch any parenthesized expression that's above that one. So we would say, is it a property cast maybe? So we can probably rewrite this to be a property cast instead of just a cast. So that one would be, it's not just a cast, it's a, I think it's just covering one specific scenario. It's probably just covering that one, covering just that single casting here. I think we do have that here. So that's interesting because we're inside of a casting expression, but it's still not picking it up. So maybe this is not working the way we expect it to be. So let's trace one specific invocation. We're gonna comment all the tests that we have here. And we're just gonna keep one. We're gonna keep this one. Actually, not this one. We're going to keep the new one that we wanted to have. So we're going to keep this one. So we're going to try to determine if, when we're getting to the point where we're evaluating that property, are we getting to, do we detect that we're inside a cast expression and that we should be rewriting this? And obviously we're not. So we're rewriting it incorrectly. That's what we're going to try to figure out. So let's go and see if we're inside a cast expression. Just going to put a breakpoint in that identifier and see where we go. Okay, so starting the debugging, and there we are. Okay, so we're at the node that's called my class. So if I take a look at the expression itself, we're in that expression, so that's not the one we want. And that one, the parent is likely to be, so if we take a look at the locals, or actually not the locals, but let's take a look at the, parent. There's a parent property somewhere. There are quite a few expressions here. Okay, it's not opening for some reason. Okay. So there's a parent, and so inside cast. Oh, it says already that we're inside a cast. So that's what we expect. So we're already casting the right way, and it's already detected as the right. Okay, but it says that the parent is not valid. Okay, so we're saying we're not inside a method, we're not inside a member access expression, but it should be saying that if we're inside an actual parenthesized expression, so the first level above the cast, then it should be valid. Okay, so that's where we're missing something. So we're inside a cast. Should we be, so being inside a cast is different. So that one is the right one, but we're not detecting that we're inside the right parent. Thing is that if we're inside of a parenthesized expression, there may be a parenthesized expression way up that it may break. So let's say we're inside a cast with parentheses. Let's see. So we're saying if we're inside a cast and that the parent of that node is also a parenthesized expression, then parenthesis expression syntax, then it should be valid. Okay, so let's figure if it helps. Okay, let's try again. So I don't know if some of you that are listening, is Roslyn something that you're using, or have you taken a look at that API and done some generators, or manipulating the Roslyn in any way? I understand that particular usage is weird because we're just using the parser, the C# parser to get to the expression that we want. So it's not actually using the full Roslyn. We're not generating assemblies or anything. We're just using the parser. But is it something that any of you are using? I'm curious. Okay, so it's still building for some reason. Okay, let's see. No more MS builds and still building. Okay. That preview is not super efficient. Okay, so I'm gonna have to kill it because it's not responding. Let's try again. All right. Wow. Looks like even starting Visual Studio is not a good day. Why is it not responding? Interesting. That's new. What's happening? Okay, probably doing something. It was trying to recover the sources. Okay. I don't need that. Okay, so Pedro is saying that working on checking for attributed interfaces. Yes, yeah. So yeah, of course, this one is a bit more complex. Yeah, it's something that is interesting as well. If you're making generators that looks for attributed interface, it's pretty easy. But that's that's the power of Roslyn. You can pick and choose parts of the compiler to do whatever you want. So that's why we're digging into that part. So Sluggy Rex is saying, could you talk about how we should be using bindings? Well, so bindings is something that that is part of the Uno platform, you know, and WPF, and it's been there for a very long time. And it's something you can play with in the playground. So let's say in here, if you have a data binding, for instance, you can see message, and your data binding some JSON here, and the data binding is going to update the text block here. So is that something that you're asking about? Is it what bindings are, or what do you want to do with bindings? Do I still get something that builds here? No. Okay, so let's try again. Still do have my breakpoint. Okay, so it's building properly this time. Okay. Okay, there's one test that failed. I have a WinUI app I'm converting to WASM, and WinUI works fine on WASM. I see the following errors in the logs. Okay. Errors are interesting. Okay, so we're inside a cast and a valid parent. Okay, still not a valid parent. Okay, so we're probably not having the right expression. So let's go and dig into the new one that we added, which is the inside parent cast. Okay. Okay, so we're not testing it. Okay, so it's not valid parent. It's not. It's an or, so it's a weird one here. So it should not be inside of a cast or inside. Okay, so we have we have something that's a bit different here. So the expression is a bit more complex. So it needs to be none of those, or as a cast. Okay, so we can say it like this for now. So let's try again. I like the fact that the compilation has gone way faster in the previous in the recent versions of Uno. The generators are much faster, and it's a lot nicer to not have to wait for everything here. Okay, so we're in the node that is called my class. So that's not the one we want. The one that we want. Okay, so this is not working. And it's probably because we're rewriting from something that is not the right one. So let's try again. Okay, so we're inside that node. And it is a valid parent, but seems incorrect because my class, we're saying we're inside of a cast, but it's not the actual cast, so it's not necessarily the right one. So that's the thing. It's just we're inside of a cast, but that's not the right one. So we're inside of a cast, but it should be that the cast expression, it should be that the identifier should be the target of the cast, not the source of the cast, not the target of the cast. So we should be changing that part as well. So that would be inside of a cast, and that's not the right expression. So we're inside of a cast. But the syntax node, so we're inside a parenthesized expression. That's another part that's interesting. But the node, I'm sorry. So in the cast, we have two things. I think we have the expression, and we have the expression. I think. So that's the first one, but there's another one in the cast expression that is useful. So there's the type. Okay, so there's type syntax and expression syntax. So what we need is that the node that we're testing on is supposed to be the expression of the cast, not the type of the cast. So let's try again. Okay, so we're here. So that one is my class. So that one should not be a valid parent. Okay, so it's false. So that's good. We're getting to another one. So this one is the my property. So that one is inside of a cast, which is fine. But it should also be a valid parent because it's the node that we're getting. The node that we're getting here, which is the identifier my property, is part of a cast expression. But since we're at the identifier name, we can know that we're also inside of a parenthesized expression, but that the identifier node that we got is the one that is the expression of the cast expression, but not the type of the cast expression. So that is the type of the cast expression. So that we're at the right place to rewrite the identifier. That's good. So if we continue, we should be having a new raw function, and that one, if we take a look at what that is, it says context.myProperty, which is fine. And then we're going to be rewriting that expression moving up top. It's probably not going to work still, because test is not inside of a cast, which is fine. It doesn't have a valid parent, most likely. Okay, there you go. That's fine. And I don't know what that is. That's another, oh, okay, so it's because it failed, which is good. Okay, so the test failed, which is expected because we didn't rewrite the thing completely. Now we have to go and figure out what the change needs to be. So let's rerun the test quickly so we have the results. Okay, so it says context.context. Okay, so that one is not the right one. And we're having something that adds that context at the beginning where it shouldn't be. And it looks like for some reason this is detected as an expression that should be having a prefix, and it's not supposed to be. So let's see where we're adding that. We are adding something like this at multiple locations. Actually, let's take a look at where we're adding this here. Okay, so that's the first time we're adding it. So my property. Okay, so that's not the right location. So there's another location where we're adding it. The context name, we have a context builder, multiple locations. So that would be the context builder. It's likely that we're adding it because at that location. So let's figure if it's the right one. Okay, so Sluggies. So you're getting warnings that are actually not related to anything here. It's actually warnings. It's not the issue that you're looking at. What I would suggest you is to create an issue with something very simple. It may be that you're having something else that doesn't work properly. Also, you're using the dev builds of the Uno Wasm Bootstrapper. Try to downgrade to the version 3.3 instead, which is a stable build, and that should be going away. At least the messages that you're seeing. So we have the new identifier here, my property. So that one is context, my property. Okay, so that's the other one that we don't want. And the expression that we have here is the full expression, and we've detected that the parent is valid, but for some reason we're not determining that the expression is something that we see that it's a parenthesized expression, and we're trying to do something about it, which is not right. So we're probably going to be doing, probably skipping that as well. So let's actually do this quickly. We're saying var is parenthesized expression, parenthesized expression syntax, and we're going to say if not valid parent, and not that, and not that, and not that as well. Then we should be having something that looks lots better, and hopefully should be green. Hopefully. There you go. It's green. Very nice. Okay, so we're further down the road to make that work, and we're going to continue next week and see where we can go, and see if we have additional syntaxes that we need to figure out how to make work. And that one looks like it's probably good. So unless there's a client that needs that, stay tuned for next week, and we're going to take a look at that, at fixing that, and have the full feature working all the way down to your code on in your applications. So there you go. I hope you had fun. I did. And until next week, happy coding. Bye for now.